Welcome to the Road Not Taken discussions with assorted professionals with a background in mathematics. I'm your host, Eder Kikianti.
And I'm your host, Rory Biggs.
It's episode 2, and we have a special guest today, Kenneth Chan, joining the pod. Hi, Kenneth.
Hi. Hi, guys. Good to be here.
Thanks,
Good to
Kenneth.
have you.
Yeah, good to have you. So, Kenneth's a good friend of mine from Sydney, Australia. He now lives in Seattle, and he has a PhD in, let me get this right, non-commutative algebra and algebraic geometry, but now he's working as a data scientist at a job site company called Indeed. He will tell us about his current job a little later. Let's start from the beginning, actually. So, Kenneth, do you mind telling us, how did you get into maths and all that jazz?
Cool. So I think the natural place to start is probably high school, right? Everyone's done a bit of mathematics in high school, and myself included. And in fact, math was always kind of my best subject. But although it was my best subject, it wasn't my favorite subject, right? In high school, I really liked to write. Mathematics was always kind of there. It was a very dependable source of I guess good grades for me. But I was never aware that you could do mathematics as a profession, or what kind of impressions I had were maybe people who work in finance do a bit of mathematics, maybe people who you know work in engineering will may know a bit of mathematics, maybe science, but not mathematics as a standalone field that people could work in. And so when I went to university, it was never a choice it was never something I considered to be the first choice for me. So in fact, the first degree I enrolled in was this degree called bioinformatics. And at the time it was a very hot field. I think nowadays it's kind of being subsumed by things like computational biology, and things like that. But still, at the time it felt like the right thing to do, right? And of course, I didn't end up doing that. I mean, as Eda mentioned before, I ended up doing mathematics, kind of to the PhD level. And I guess at university, I really that's when I found my love for mathematics. Um, the thing that the time when I knew was actually kind of interesting. It was at the end of my first year, and when you go through your first year of studies, you do calculus, you do a little bit of matrix algebra, and at the end of my first year, I looked at what subjects I were to do in my second year. I noticed there were no mathematics courses in it, and I felt this sudden loss. Right, it's like this subject that I've done all these years, right, since my youth, is now going to be a thing of the past. And I thought
Mm,
to myself, this is really kind of sad for me. And so what I did in my second year was to enroll myself into more math classes, in addition to what I had to do for my engineering degree.
mm.
And at the end of my second year was when I decided, okay, I think it's time to make the switch. And so beyond that, I went on and did my PhD. I stayed in Australia to do my PhD. And there are some nice things about staying in your home country to do your graduate studies. Some disadvantages that I can talk about a little bit later.
Yeah.
But I guess do you want me to maybe talk about how I got to where I am now, or is there some other questions you want me to answer before we lead to that?
Let's do it chronologically, I suppose.
Yeah,
Okay,
let's
okay.
follow the
So
road where it takes us.
Yeah,
But it's fascinating because I'm already feeling like I've had some similar experiences.
yeah.
But it's also only by second year that I realized, mathematics, that's the thing that I'm passionate about and
Mm,
that I'd like to dedicate more time to.
yeah. Because you enrolled in
cool.
physics first. This is
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Rory's story. Yeah. So you didn't mention where you studied, Kenneth. I
Oh,
know, but
so
the audience might want to know.
I see. So I studied in my in the University of New South Wales, which is a university in Sydney, Australia, where I grew up. So in Australia, you typically don't travel to another city to do your university studies. And so I went there for my undergraduate degree in mathematics, and then I stayed at the same university to do my PhD in mathematics.
Mm.
And so yeah, so when I was doing my PhD in Australia, I guess to talk chronologically, I was doing what people would do in a PhD, fighting with mathematics, doing research, learning things, feeling the difficulties of doing research in an isolated environment, and overcoming that with various things that you discover along the way. And I guess after that, after the PhD studies, after I completed my thesis, I had this choice to make, right? So it's always hard to try and find out what you want to do, and even after you finish a PhD, it's still a question, right? So when you do a PhD, you think to yourself, you're preparing to be a professor of mathematics somewhere,
Mm.
right? And so you also are completely, you realize that this is, kind of playing against the odds a little bit, because the number of people who are coming out with these mathematics PhDs, or whatever science PhDs,
Mhm.
far outnumber the number of faculty positions
Yeah.
available. And so you have to kind of make a choice, right? So when I finished up my degree in Australia, I was thinking about whether I should, maybe go into industry, maybe find a postdoc. Um, and I guess the plan was always to do a postdoc, right, if I could get one.
Mm.
But applying from Australia to the United States and other places in the world is actually a little bit more difficult, right? Because you don't have the network to
Yeah.
to let people know who you are, and you got to rely a lot on kind of what your advisor can do for you in terms of getting some visibility.
Mm.
And so fortunately, I was able to come to a conference in Seattle, actually, many years ago. And eventually I did get a job in at the University of Washington here. And so I spent the next, I guess, 3 and a bit years in maybe 4 years actually in Seattle, with a short kind of fellowship at MSRI as well. And so that was actually in my kind of retrospection, probably the best mathematical experience I've had. Not to say that learning mathematics from my advisor was not great. I mean, he was a great teacher,
Mm.
and he introduced me to basically most of the math that I know. But one thing about doing math in Australia is that it's isolated country, right? It's very hard to fly there. It takes a long
Yeah.
time. So if you're
Yeah.
visiting Australia, you're thinking about going there, you have to think, do I really need to make this trip, right? So you end up not having as many visitors come through. Um,
Yes.
and as a graduate student, I think it's very important to be able to meet people and talk mathematics with them.
Yes.
And I guess one of the things I lacked in Australia was that kind of mathematical community.
Yes. Yeah.
You know,
Hmm.
we had a community, but it wasn't like in the right field, right? Everyone
Yeah.
is everyone
Everyone.
does different things,
Yes. Correct. Yeah.
right? Yeah, so you end up talking about math in general,
Yeah.
but you
Yeah.
can't readily talk about math kind of specifically about problems that you are thinking about.
Yeah.
And so when I got to University of Washington, I mean, it's a a very good public research university here,
Mm.
and it's not like in the center of the United States. It's kind of still at the edge of the United States,
Yeah.
but we do get a lot of West Coast and Canadian visitors come through,
Mm.
and also visitors from other places, right? I
Yeah.
remember seeing a talk from Ed Witten at UW, and he talked for hours and hours, and nobody dared to tell him to stop. Right? That doesn't right. I mean, in Australia, I think we met Terence Tao, right? I think
We
Ava,
did.
you
Yes.
know him too, right? But you know, you meet a lot more of these luminaries at a
Yeah.
place like any good university in
Yeah.
America. So and of course there's a very big graduate student population
Mm.
at UW who I could talk to, postdocs as well, and so found a really nice community here to experience mathematics together and
Yeah.
kind of do math research together.
Yeah.
So that was really nice, right? Now, you know, at the end of your postdoc, right? you have to ask the same old question, right? What am I going to do now, right? It seems to be the same question keeps coming up, and so
Yes.
yeah,
Limbo takes a while to get out of.
right, and so at the end of that, I thought, okay, I have a few choices here, right? I could look for another postdoc. I could apply for a tenure track position and hope for the best, right? Or I could head into industry. And actually, being in Seattle, Seattle is a very kind of vibrant city full of, I guess, full of technology companies, right? And I guess a lot of my friends were working in technology. I guess Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they're kind of big here, Facebook as well. And so, you start asking yourself, right? Is this really the right path for me?
Mm,
Trying to to fight this uphill battle to be a professor somewhere, and I thought to myself, right? Yeah, I struggled for a little bit, right? And I guess at the end, I decided, yeah, I think I'll give this tech thing a go, and so this there was just a vague idea, right? I want to get a job somewhere
mm,
here locally, and it wasn't, clear, as a what, right? And so
yeah.
data science was something that was kind of always in the background, right? You hear about it being the hottest job of the year, like a few years back. I'm not sure if this
Mm,
is still the case now, but back then, they didn't have any of these data science diplomas or degrees, and so they were really hiring people with uh, I guess numerate disciplines, right?
yeah.
And so I thought that was a good fit. I also considered doing some software engineering. There was always something that was on the horizon as well. But I
Mm,
invested a bit more time in data science, right? So before I left my postdoc, I decided there was one thing that I did that was kind of useful. I organized a seminar for data science,
mm,
just around the department to see who was interested in learning some of this stuff, and people may have thought about the same things as I did, right? Thinking about um, what do I do after
mm,
my stint at UW, right? Whether they were graduate students or postdocs, it was always a question for everybody. And so, to my surprise, actually, a lot of people showed up.
mm,
Probably one of the biggest seminars at UW at the time, right? I mean, not in the department, right? Because
yeah.
you do your kind of algebraic geometry seminar, you get your number theory seminar. You're not going to get 30 people showing up to the audience, right? But I think I got about 30 people showing up. I mean, early
Wow.
on, and yeah, people were interested, and it was a nice thing, right? We got people talking about what subjects they knew that had some relevance to data science,
Mm,
and I knew very little back then, and then, in fact.
Hmm.
I didn't learn data science properly until I was well into my first job. It was just kind of let's just figure out what intersection it has with math and then go from there, right?
mm,
And so the I guess two cool things I did was to get everyone involved, all right, and felt like we learned something. Not sure whether we actually did, but we actually felt like we did.
yeah.
The other thing was to get some industry people to come in and tell us about what it's like
Mm,
working in industry. So we got a guy from Microsoft and a guy from Tableau Software to come and talk to us about some of their experiences. And it was really really cool. They told us, the Microsoft person uh, told us about what data science is like
mhm,
in industry, and it's actually a lot less mathematical, or it involves a lot less mathematics than one might think.
mm,
It was a lot of kind of business concepts, business kind of considerations, practical considerations, over the kind of more advanced topics that we were thinking about. And the guy from Tableau, actually, he just invited us to the campus to check it out, and that was a blast, right? They had a really nice campus, and
mm,
I think they were one of the fastest growing companies in Seattle at some point, or maybe even
yeah.
in general. So they're still here, right?
Right.
And so those were good experiences, and I think finally when it came time for me to apply for jobs, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know for sure,
Yeah.
but I'm sure that stood out a little bit to people who are reading my
Uh-huh.
resume,
Yeah.
and eventually I ended up doing some actually computational biology at a biotech company at first, and then I moved over to doing some data science at a food delivery
Yeah.
company, and eventually ended up at Indeed doing, I guess, still doing data science, but more on the machine learning
Yeah.
engineering side of data science.
Yeah. I have two questions from your story towards the end of your postdoc at University of Washington. So you mentioned about 30 people coming to this seminar that you organized. Are they all math PhDs or mixed?
So maybe, maybe I have to step back and say, it's like when you ask somebody, how big was that fish? It was
Yeah.
like this big. I think it was about 30.
Yeah, yeah.
So but then when you think, right, are there actually 30 PhD
Yeah.
students that you
I'm
I,
just curious, are there that many or is
so
there undergrad students going or some of the faculty members
so
maybe?
actually we had a good number of postdocs. I think
Ah, okay, right.
probably, yeah, we had probably 4 or 5 postdocs were there. I
And
think we had 1 or 2 faculty who showed up, and they
right,
didn't end up participating in
right.
seminar. They just want to see what it was,
Yeah.
and I think the rest were graduate students. Let me be conservative and say maybe it was like maybe 25 to 30 people. I don't remember.
25,
It
30
was
is close
it was
enough.
a while ago. I don't quite remember. I remember the room was kind of full.
Yeah.
But in the end, we talked for, we organized it for a quarter. We did the quarters here, and so
Mm,
we had speakers, right? So
right.
at least like 7 or 8 people talked. So
Right, right, right.
and
Now I
so
was just
we at least had
wondering.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the sort of like the diversity of is it just the postdocs, is it just the graduate students or but yeah, no, no, that's good to know. Kenneth and I met when we were still doing our PhDs. I lived in Melbourne, but we met in one of the Australian Math Society conferences. We get to know a lot of people who studying PhD in various universities, and not until then I didn't realize that people when they do PhD in maths, not everybody has this sort of desire to I want to pursue this professor in mathematics, right? Not everybody
Hmm.
is was like that. And then I realized that a lot of people actually they want to have the PhD and they want to go back to industry, which I think is very brave for people to do this because I feel that you miss out on years of experience, like the years that you spend on your phd you missed out on industrial experience, but there are others obviously skills that you gain while doing the phd that became useful, which we're going to ask Kenneth a little bit later. um, but yeah, so my second question coming back to this, when you organize this seminar, then there's lots of interest from the grad students and from postdoc wanting to know what data science is the hot thing, data science, whatever. And you invited Microsoft, someone from Microsoft, which we all know what kind of company Microsoft is. And the second one you say is Tableau, right? Yeah. Maybe it's not so well known. Could you talk about what Tableau is?
Probably, I'm not the best person to give an introduction of on what they do, but I
Yeah.
think their main product is data visualization. And so, when you have data, data usually lives inside some database, right? Or maybe multiple databases, or maybe even multiple sources, right? And one of the main challenges is to, you know aside from fancy machine learning predictive kind of algorithms, right, is to just understand the data. Let's make a graph or a plot of some of these data and see what it looks like.
Hmm.
And so even just this task can take some time, right? You
Hmm.
tell somebody to
Mhm.
find the data and put them all together, join all these tables together, and then make a nice plot. That's a time consuming exercise, and a lot of times, you know you don't really you don't really want to spend the time to make a nicely colored plot with the right axes, deciding which axes to log and so forth, which ones to combine. So Tableau, I think one of the main things is to make this process automatic. So you just give it some data,
Uh-huh.
point it to
Yeah.
where your data lives, and then it will automatically generate some visualizations for you.
Hmm.
And I think for a lot of people who are kind of time short, this is great, right? If you have a meeting coming up, or you have to prepare for a presentation that's kind of involved and involving lots of these things, Tableau can really come in handy.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's I don't know. I think that they do a lot more than that.
Right,
This is just
right.
what I know
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
from my little my very very small amount of understanding about some of their products. So if I'm wrong about this, we should cut this out.
We can Google it, I
But
suppose.
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
but so after the seminar, do you think you have a clearer picture and maybe you can share with our audience what does a data scientist do?
So I
What?
mean, I think at the end of the seminar I couldn't, but now I can because I've worked as a data scientist for a while now, and so this is a good question, right? Because the title data scientist is one of those things, one of those titles that mean many things, and it also changes with the time, right?
Mm,
So and it depends on what industry you're in, what country you're in, even. So but there are two kind of extremes, right? So on one end is data science analytics, where you're probably doing what I described earlier. You're trying to understand data by identifying where these data live in your, within your realm, your company, or your research projects, or wherever you happen to be working, right? Final data, when you want to put them together in a coherent way, right? You want to identify, which parts of the data that's living in this vast kind of ecosystem is useful for you, and you want to do some analytics with it, like I guess aggregations and summaries, and you want to figure out like how much time do people spend on the app that your company happens to be using per day, right? On average.
Hmm.
And so you know you have lots of these things that you can cook up, right, from your data, and as you cook up more and more of these kind of I guess metrics and summary kind of data, I guess summarized data points, then you can start asking questions like, oh, can we predict, can we
Hmm.
construct models to describe this data instead of just displaying the data. And so as you get more and more into predictive modeling, you have to involve machine learning, you have to involve quite a bit of software engineering, you have to involve trying to do all of these things in a distributed way, in a scalable way. And so then, naturally think about doing some of this in the cloud. And so as you move more and more towards that side of data science, then, you end up doing more machine learning engineering, or, the kind of software engineering that's
mm,
specifically designed to do machine learning, both training, prediction at scale. And so on that end of the data scientists kind of, well, I should say, people who do that kind of work are sometimes still referred to as data scientists,
mhm,
although they are also sometimes referred to just software engineers or machine learning engineers. And so there's a spectrum, right? And I think,
mhm,
Hmm.
when you say the word data scientist, or the title data scientist, it can refer to anywhere in between, right? Depending on where you
Yeah.
are, you'll be heavier on one side and lighter on the other, and vice versa.
mm,
And so the end goal, I suppose, is often to drive decisions for in terms of management, right? Do we spend more time on this? Do we need to improve that? Or on the predictive side, I guess that also helps to decide, well, which way to go, which is the better path.
Yep. So those are often questions that are asked of the more analytics type of data scientists, right? We need to make a decision. We need to do some experiments. Let's do the experiment in a statistically rigorous way, and with the right metrics, and that you cooked up, and see, right, which one seems to be the right thing to do. And of course, yeah, you also, besides that, you also, a lot of tech these days require you to predict things like, continuous values, right?
mm,
So like for instance, when I was working in food delivery, there was, a need to predict how long it takes for a certain item to be prepared at a certain location. And so
Aha.
to have a better handle on that number, or on how many minutes that is, will allow, you know the delivery to be smoother, right? You can send the driver there at a more appropriate time.
So
Right.
lots of data analysis happening with Amazon deliveries.
Yeah, Amazon deliveries, yeah, for sure. I mean, I actually I've never worked at Amazon, but they, I mean, certainly, I actually don't know if they're still in the delivery business, in
Ah,
terms of restaurants, right? I know
yes.
they had a restaurant kind of delivery, uh, 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 I guess, department or product. I'm not sure whether they're still doing that.
Mm.
Of course, they deliver stuff, right? Like you know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazon drivers, deliver um, things, and they're not necessarily food items, but products that you buy, right? You see the trucks drive. I mean, is there Amazon in where you guys are?
Well, you can order from Amazon, but it's sort of the
Sits in
delivery
a
is done.
warehouse
Yeah.
to be cleared for a month.
Yes. Yes. And then yeah, the delivery company obviously not Amazon. It's called something else. But
Some
yeah,
other courier,
yeah.
yeah.
And you pay. You have
Okay.
to. Yeah, you have to pay import tax and all those things.
Yeah. But
Oh
I mean,
wow.
maybe a better example would be what we do have is Uber.
Yeah, Uber. Yeah.
Right.
And I'm sure there's all kinds of prediction going on there in order
Yeah.
to optimize things.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So I suppose the food delivery like Uber Eats is what we have
Yeah.
here.
Nice.
Something that what you mentioned earlier. Yeah. So coming back to the end of your postdoc, getting into your first job, you wanna maybe share a bit of a story how that happened? Maybe was it
Oh, I see.
scary? Was it?
So
Yeah.
no, so it wasn't scary. I guess going into my first job, I think what was a little bit difficult was is always this thing of applying for jobs and you know not really getting a response quickly, or applying for lots of jobs and not really getting responses. So um, I think this happens to everybody who's
Oh, yes.
with no job experience,
Mm,
and I actually don't know how badly that affected me, because I know people when they apply for jobs, right? They really apply for jobs, right? They'll go on LinkedIn, they'll go use all the resources they
yeah.
can, apply for everything, right? I don't actually know how many I applied for, but certainly, you know, less than 10, right? It wasn't like I was
Hmm.
applying for everything in sight. I was just,
Mm,
seeing if, this place, that place. Let's say 20. I think 10 is
yeah.
probably a lie. 20 is probably right. But, I think I spoke to, the first interview I had was actually didn't go well, obviously, right? I didn't have any kind of interview experience. I didn't know, um I actually didn't know the material so well. I didn't know what was expected. I didn't know how the conversation was supposed to go. And so I remember at the end of the interview, I actually asked the interviewer how I went. And you don't do that, right? You just do not do that, because they're not in a position to tell you this,
Yeah.
right? They'll have
Yeah.
to go back and give their feedback. I mean, now that I've worked for a little while, I know how it works, right? But that was a wrong thing to say. And of
Hmm.
course, I mean, that's not what if I did well, that wouldn't have
Yeah.
mattered, right? But
Yeah.
there's just these little things that you don't know. And I think the biotech job I ended up with was actually recommended to me by one of my friends who had another friend who worked there,
Mm,
and he just thought I do some science and it may be appropriate. And so I thought, why the hell not? I'll just apply for it. And so I wrote the application, I sent it in, and I forgot about it actually. So when they eventually got back to me, it was a good 2 months later actually.
mm,
They called me, or I think they called me, or they sent me an email first. I don't remember. But I talked to them. I actually asked them, what is this position actually? I don't,
mm.
so don't do that, right? Like
Yeah.
you should know what you're applying for. You should
Yeah.
know the company, right? But I didn't follow any of these advice that I give to
Uh-huh.
people now, right? I was like, what is this again? I don't remember. I'm sorry. And so I had the person who I spoke to first explain to me, and then when I was interviewing, I remember my first phone interview was with a statistician, quite a good one, in fact. And so he was asking me a question that basically the answer was the t-test, right? It was just the first thing you learn in statistics. And I remember it took me some stuttering and it took me some thinking to get to it, which you know if I were the interviewer, I'd be like, this is a huge red flag. This guy's an idiot. He doesn't know basic things off the top of his head. But somehow, for whatever reason, I got through that interview, and they invited me on site. And I remember this is probably my first on-site interview. Um, yeah, this was my first on-site interview. Well, if I'm wrong about this, you guys can't fact check me, right? But yeah, I think it was my first one, and it was a interesting interview in that you have your standard things. They asked you about some coding, some statistics, but there was an aspect of it where this was a scary part for me. So they gave me a paper to read, and they said to me, "You're going to read this paper, and you're going to present it to us, the authors, like you're presenting it at a conference or journal club or whatever, and we're going to ask you some questions
About
to
our
see if you
paper.
understand the paper and see if you are able to kind of work with it, because that's going to be part of your job." And I thought,
Yeah.
wow, this is going to be tough because I'm not a biologist,
Mhm.
I am not a statistician, and reading this paper is going to be pushing it. And so I read the paper, and the biology made zero sense to me, of course. And but you know, the thing is, right, if you're a non-biologist reading biology, you can kind of get a sense for what they're doing,
Mm.
as opposed to the other way around. If a biologist was to read a math paper, it would
Mhm.
be a little bit like gibberish, right?
Yeah.
And but I had that on my side because biology is inherently less hierarchical than mathematics. And so, man,
Mhm.
I had some background in biology, so at least I know what I know what a cell is. I know what DNA is, right? And so some of these things, when you read it, made sense. But of course, when they start talking about the specifics of how they do the experiment, using technology that didn't exist when I did my undergraduate studies,
Mm.
of course that made no sense to me, right? But so at the heart of this paper was actually a combinatorial kind of technique to compute some probabilities, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that was the part I understood, right? I remember, oh yeah, this
Uh-huh.
is something that I would have seen when I was in first or second year,
Mm.
right? And so then I can play around with the formulas. And I remember, when I was presenting this paper, I was asked by them to explain it, of course, and then they asked me about the biology component, and I just flat out said, look, you know, I can't really answer this question. I have no idea. And I mean, I can talk about the math and stats part, but but I'll have to be honest, right? I just don't know. I just don't know enough biology. And so somehow after all that, I got the job, right? They called me back uh, shortly after that, and they said, they were going to give me an offer. And at that time, I was kind of a little bit ambivalent still because I,
Mm.
I didn't envision working in biotech. I really, in my mind, I wanted to, either go to Microsoft or Amazon or whatever. Those are the big companies who are
Mm.
headquartered in Seattle. And I
Mm.
figured, so many people I know work there, it can't be that bad, right? So, but I didn't consider biotechnology. Man, I thought, what even is this biotech thing, right? But you know, I thought to myself, right, at that point, I've been applying for a while, and it was difficult, right? It was not so easy
Mhm.
to get people to respond, and also didn't apply to too many places. I spent a lot of time reading, and trying to learn as much as I can. And I thought,
Mm.
I'm getting kind of tired of this. I mean, maybe I'll just get a job and learn on the job. And that turns out to be actually um, a good thing to do. In fact, what advice I give people now is your first job, it doesn't matter, right? They can underpay you, they can pay you a lot. It makes no difference. What's really important is whether you can learn on the job
Mm.
and
Mhm.
help you progress into the next part of your career. Because you know, as a fresh PhD coming out, right, the variance in salary is not that much, right? Even if you're on
Mm.
the top end or the low end,
Mm.
um,
Mhm.
but give it 5 years on, the variance is huge, and
Mm.
so
Mhm.
you got to make sure that whatever you do there, you end up on a higher end of thing. If money is your objective, right? I mean,
Right.
for a lot of people, I think coming out to work, that has to be part of it, right? Because if they didn't pay me, I have
Mhm.
to wonder whether I would still do my job, right? And this is the same for everybody. So I think, yeah, having that first job set you up so that you can um, progress in a way that in 5 years, 10 years, you can be top of your game is quite
Mm.
important. It's not important to be top of your game when you first come out. It doesn't matter, basically.
Right.
But yeah, the first job, I learned a lot about what it means to work in an office, what it means to communicate complicated things to people who may be educated in a different field.
Mm.
Part of my job, besides doing some very basic experimental design, is to actually talk to our or their rather academic or pharmaceutical partners on what studies they're doing. We're doing some analysis for them, and we present some results, and they'll kind of take these results and figure out whether they want to write a paper, continue further studies, and things like that. So a lot of these were just like what we're doing now, right? Zoom calls, or
Mm-hmm.
at that time we were using WebEx, and these guys were not in the same location as us, so you have all the problem of not 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 being local, right? And
Yeah.
it's not so easy to just draw on a board, and you have to have
Yeah.
slides prepared, and
Yeah.
it's a different way of communicating besides
Mm.
just simplifying complicated concepts. So that actually turns out to be one of the most important things you
Mm.
learn in a job. Not to say that you don't learn this in grad school or in a postdoc, but
Yeah.
the kind of objective and the way you communicate is a little bit different,
Mm.
and you gotta be careful not to give away company kind of sensitive company information as well. So you can't just blurt stuff out. But of course, that was what they told me. But in the end, I'm like, that's not really that important. It's not like you can blurt some stuff out. Someone's going to reconstruct what you do. It's not possible, right? A lot of things that people do
Mm-hmm.
at companies is not just one secret.
Yeah.
It's years and years of hard work built
Yeah.
on top of infrastructure upon infrastructure. Just because you say one or two words that may indicate how you do it, they're not going to
Mm.
be able to reproduce it.
Yeah.
So, but we had it told to us, hey, be careful what you say. But I'm like, okay, sure, yeah, yeah.
Cool. So, do you miss math?
That's a good question. I mean, I think I would miss math if I didn't still do it. So actually, when I was leaving academia for industry, one of the things, yeah, I had to ask myself this question, right? I'm going to miss math, just like I was going to miss math many years ago,
Yeah.
when I was in end of my first year. So I actually said to my postdoc mentor, James Zhang at University of Washington, to see if we could continue to collaborate, right? And he graciously said yes. All right, he's a very busy man. He's got lots of people who want to talk to him, and yeah, I've been meeting him pretty regularly for the
Mm.
last
Mm.
4.5 years now. Working on papers, and with him and whoever else is in his kind of vicinity, postdocs, other people who are visiting. So it's been a really nice way to preserve my mathematical community,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
so I don't, because I don't have to miss it, right?
You
I'm
don't have to
still
visit. Yeah.
involved. Yeah,
That's cool. So you're still doing some math on the side. This is what
yeah,
you.
I'm
This
still
is
doing
what.
some math. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
nearly as
As
much
intense.
as I would
Yeah.
have done before, right? But
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
great. There's no pressure. I can do as much or as little as I want, and
Yeah.
there's no real pressure to say, oh, you want to get this in the nicest journal you can. You get a rejection, you say, whatever, man, it doesn't matter. Send
Doesn't
it somewhere
matter.
else. And I want to say that I'm able to do this, right? Like, the other thing that you can do is say, oh, I'm only going to send it to journals that are run by societies, right?
Mm.
But I don't know if I've actually managed to do this.
Yeah.
But this whole kind of thing where journals are just kind of profiteering off academics'
Mm-hmm.
labor is something that
Mm.
I'm very much aware of.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's the other thing. You have the freedom, right? Another question, like, this is maybe not your question, but like, the freedom that you have when you're an academic, um, was I obviously gave up some of that freedom, but I have other freedoms now,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
actually have I can choose to do math if I want or
Yeah.
not, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can choose to where to publish the papers. I don't have to worry about
Mm-hmm.
prestige and all that stuff, right?
Mm.
I can choose to move if I want, right? Having good marketable skills means that you can find another job pretty easily. And actually, working in a big company means that you can probably like ask to relocate to another office, and it's probably
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Given some constraints, I think it's usually fine. So yeah, so I think you exchange some freedoms for other freedoms, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think this is something that maybe I didn't realize.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew kind of abstractly, but I didn't experience it. Didn't really realize it
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
when I was a postdoc. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Did I
Yeah,
answer your question? I don't know.
I think you did.
Oh, did
I asked
I?
you
Okay.
whether you miss math, and you said,
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Cool. Okay.
yeah. So going back to doing math, right? Because the reason I'm bringing this back up is I basically we became friends through this sort of community of Australian how should we say it, PhD students in mathematics at that point, right? So there's like a number
Hmm.
of us sort of started PhD around about the same time. We meet every year, and I felt like my first year was a bit lonely for many reasons, right? Because well, I moved countries, so from Indonesia to Australia,
Mm,
which is a huge culture shock for me.
right.
And then yeah, because the countries are quite different. And then the where I studied is quite a small university, so there are not many students doing mathematics, and yeah, and you can't always just rely on those two people, right? They have family and they have like other things to do and that kind of thing. So it felt a bit lonely in my first year, in the sense that I don't have anyone to talk to, so to say. And then I sort of like, all right, let's go to this sort of the Australian maths, what do you call it, MZ, Australian Mathematical Sciences Institute, and the Australian Mathematical Society. They always have something for the grad students, right, for the PhD students. And I started going to winter school and summer school and going to this conferences. And then we became friends. Like a number of us, we were quite a huge group. And I felt like at the time that's when maths become fun for me, because like first year I found it really lonely, and it's sort of like I'm struggling by myself. And just to have someone to talk to, even though like you and I are doing very different mathematics, like we rarely talk about like our math sort of
Right.
like specifically discussing our thesis, right? We don't really do this, but it's just sort of like to see you every year and then just sort of um talk about whatever, right? Just catching up with life, and then sort of sharing things about what's happening in your life and that kind of thing, and the struggles that everyone is going through. And for me, I feel like that was like to have a community, and you use this word a lot, like to keep your community. And
Hmm.
I felt like that sort of what kept me going was the community. I think if I were sort of like just by myself, I don't I think I was gonna lose it. Like just sort of like mentally speaking, like I couldn't handle it by myself, because doing PhD is not, it's not the mathematics is not the hard part, right? It's this sort of like there's so much pressure. Yes,
Perseverance.
exactly. Perseverance is what you need. So, well, mathematics is hard. But I didn't say not so hard. That's not really correct. But I mean,
Yeah.
it's not just the math, right? It's not just the math that you're dealing with, but there's all of these other things, like writing the thesis, and then like writing your first paper, presenting your first talk, that kind of thing. And it can get really, really stressful, right? So, I mean, like now at your workplace, or after you finish academia. So, do you also, you said you still maintain the mathematical community, but what about at work? Do you feel like it's important at work to have like a strong community to keep you going?
Absolutely. So I think this depends on the kind of person you are.
Yeah.
I know, for myself, I won't speak for others, right? It's incredibly important to have kind of good social relationships with people at work, right? So I don't worry too much. Some people are worried about, if they become friends, too good friends with people at work, they may be like conflicting. I don't worry too
Mm,
much about that.
mm, mm.
I think what's important is exactly as you said, right? Having a community of people around you who you can maybe ask questions to if you need,
Yeah.
Mhm.
maybe just complain to each other about
Yes.
various things. That's what that only people at the same place as you can know about, right?
Yeah.
You
Oh
can't
yes.
yeah, you can't complain
I
to your
chat to Ida all the time.
right.
We would call each other and just like, can you believe?
Yeah. So I remember, like, one of the things that I think is a really nice tradition is going out to have a beer with your coworkers,
Hmm.
on Thursday or Friday after work. And I don't know if it's, I think in Australia it's maybe more of a tradition, but here,
Yes.
Mhm.
yeah, people do it, but not everyone. I mean, especially last year, it was not possible. But
Yeah.
before that, it was always yeah, not a super regular thing, but whenever we could, we went out and had a beer and
Yeah.
talked about yeah, what some of the things are like, where's this company going, right?
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
question that you can only talk about with your work colleagues, right?
Hmm.
You can't really talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
with your friends or with your family members, because they don't know, right? Probably
Mm-hmm.
because you're not supposed to tell them all that much. So yeah, I think it's important. So I think for me, actually, when I was at at the second job, the food delivery place, I I actually was not at the head office, because the head office is in San Francisco,
Mm.
and I was at a satellite office in Bellevue, which is I guess it's a city next to Washington. Sorry, city next to Seattle, where I lived, and the office had about 20 people at its height, and I was good friends with one of the people there, who actually introduced me to the job, and I made friends with a good number of people there, and we we would go out for beers, but I think and coffee, but I think more importantly, they were firstly mostly software engineers, and I think I was able to learn a lot from them,
Mm.
regarding you know things about software engineering that you can't necessarily easily get from books, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Or maybe you can, but it takes a long time. You have to read through
Yeah.
a lot of opinionated articles and books about what you should do.
Yeah.
And so yeah, just like the practice of how to code in a kind of in a group setting in a team. What are some good practices? What are some bad practices that you should avoid?
Mm.
And so, these things come up when you're just sitting around having coffee or having a beer, and I think your community helps you pick up on a lot of these things,
Yeah.
and I think I attribute like a lot of what I learned to the guys I was just talking to in a social way, right? Not necessarily my
Yeah.
manager, not
Yeah.
necessarily my teammates, but
Yeah.
like just people I'm talking to. And I think
Yeah.
depending on your personality, right? That
True.
can be a
Yeah.
really nice way to learn and to extend yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then of course, there's a social support as well, right? Like
Yeah.
beer is always the best way to cool down, right? And the social support that you get from I don't think there's a good substitute for it, right? Just
Yeah.
a bunch of guys having a beer after work. I think that's great. Yeah.
No, and I so agree with this. It's so often, even for oneself, it's
Yeah.
not that clear that you're doing something productive
Yes.
when you're having a beer and a chat.
Yeah.
But if you look back,
Yeah.
there's so much that issues and problems that you solved,
Yeah.
and new ways of thinking about things and opinions, and you learn so much by
Yeah.
having those interactions.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. When I was working in this the bioinformatics lab. So it's called NICTA, the National ICT Australia. And our boss, he's just fantastic. He every Friday, 4 o'clock, he said, "Okay, we're going to the pub." So we have this one pub on campus that we always go to, and he just said, "Just put it on tap." So he pays for our drinks, right? So it's sort of like what boss doing these kind of things, you know
Yeah,
what I mean,
no.
like paying for your beer like every Friday, but he wants the hour, like to sort of sometimes it's an hour, sometimes 2 hours. So it's always like sort of no, put it on tap, and then like we're having drinks and whatever, and he wants to sort of have like the camaraderie in the team, especially because all of us was so different, like some of us doing computer science, some of us like me doing math, and there's like someone's doing genetics. And when we're in an office setup, right, you're it's so formal, like it's sort of like I don't know. Maybe you feel difficult, or you feel like, oh, should I ask that guy about that question? It felt stupid, but I don't know
Yeah.
any genetics, so I feel like I should ask the question. But after this sort of like beer sessions, like one or two, you're getting more like, oh, that guy's pretty cool, actually. I'm just gonna like hop over to his desk at one time and just say like, hey, I'm confused with like the sentence that you wrote in the report. Can can we have a chat real quick? And I think it's very important. Well, I don't know, as you said, like personality helps. Like I
Hmm.
sometimes have social anxiety, so for me, if I know the person like sort of a little bit more than just you're my coworker, right, I know a little
Right.
bit about you, like where you're from, that kind of thing. For me, it's like easier to talk to you. So it is I think absolutely very important to just and as you said, like even though it doesn't seem so productive that you're actually going out for beer on Friday instead of working, but but to have that atmosphere at work, I think is very important. I mean,
Mhm.
even the idea for to starting the series is actually coming from just like casual conversations that we have over,
Yeah.
I don't know,
Right.
whatever. So yeah, ideas can come at any time, really, and I think this is extremely important. Yeah.
I think having a bar tab is dangerous, though.
Heaven above. Yes, that is dangerous. I think we just felt bad for
Well,
him and we're like, okay, let's not drink too much, right?
it would be interesting if they applied some data science to this and worked out. I think it might be some of the most productive money spent.
It's like the happiest team.
Creates
Yeah.
cohesion, helps answer questions between co-workers. I mean, it's probably cheap for what you're getting from it.
I'm not going to say on camera what happens when there's a bar tab.
Oh dear, that's really
Um,
funny. Uh,
And the other aspect that we touched on, and I think is so important, is that learning continues.
yeah.
You spoke a lot about how much you kept on learning new things and doing new things, and I think often people have sort of this conception, and I think the world is changing. It's less and less that way. That you study, you get your skills, and then you go out and you apply your skills. But that is very much not the case.
Yeah, so I think, especially if you work in a field like technology, things change, right, very quickly. And just for instance, right, the stuff I would have learned at university, that I guess I did mathematics, so I didn't learn it at my in my classes, but I was aware of, uh, I guess what the computer science people were teaching, and maybe what the biology people were teaching. Like next what they do now with DNA sequencing, right? Those next generation sequencing machines weren't around when I was an undergrad, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so there's a completely kind of new way of sequencing DNA that allows you to do things at scale and quickly. And so it allows you to answer questions that you couldn't even ask before.
Hmm.
And so that's one, right? So it's not so much you have to learn it, but it's just these are things that technologies you got to be aware of.
Yeah.
And I guess in terms of like more to what I'm actually doing now, right? Like when I was an undergrad, or even like when I was yeah, maybe let's say undergrad, right? There was no, I mean, if I say this, someone's going to say, "Oh, that's false," right? I mean, there was no cloud computing, right?
Mm.
They may have been
Yeah.
AWS may have been around in a primitive form,
Mm.
but certainly not,
Not as what it
not
is now.
the
Yeah.
yeah, not
Yeah.
not the beast it is now, right? And so if you kind of work with these technologies, right, like they're developing things at a breakneck pace, right? Every year, every month, they come up with new things,
Hmm.
Mm.
and so you know I think one is that uh, if you work in any field, right, you got to be aware of what new things are coming up that may make your life easier.
Mm.
And in fact, some of these things, if you work at a smaller company, you could actually be the person introducing them to your company if you know about it.
Hmm.
And because at a small place, right, you are kind of one of the few pairs of eyes and ears on these things.
Mm.
And a bigger company is probably not, right, because they would have worked, hopefully worked it all out, right? But yeah, so being aware of things is important. And the other thing is learning what you don't know, and I guess figuring out what you need to know at what level is also important. I
Mm.
remember, yeah, when I was young, I wanted to learn everything, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to learn everything, and you keep, it's like this thing where you keep clicking on Wikipedia articles. You can do the same thing. You can do the same thing with papers, right? You can just keep
Yes.
Oh
following the
yeah,
papers, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
And you're really doing a depth first search of this tree of knowledge, and
Yes.
that's
Hmm.
a bad thing to do, because if you do that, you end up knowing very particular things about something down to
Yeah.
the very very final bits of minutiae, and then there's no story that you can tell about what you know, right? And none of
Mm.
it's useful. It's just some stuff. It's connected very tenuously in one direction. And
Mm.
Hmm.
so I think part of figuring out, I guess during the PhD, I guess most people figure this out. Even before that, is to how do you learn something in a way that that is useful to you and that sticks, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think, yeah, I'll liken it to more of a breadth first kind of a way of traversing this tree of knowledge, right?
Mm.
You figure out what domain of knowledge you want to learn, and then you kind of just like learn the first level, right? Maybe just a statement of the theorems, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
maybe you pick out the ones that may be important, and you kind of read them a bit more, and you like decide which branches to go down.
Yeah.
And I think stepping away from mathematics, right? You can apply this to a lot of things, right? Like you're trying to learn a new programming language, right? You're not going to like try and figure out everything that it can do, right? You want to pick
Yeah.
out like a domain, or that for instance, if I'm trying to learn how to use like cloud computing, AWS for stuff,
Mm.
um, I guess, I mean, this is what I've been doing at work, right? But
Yeah.
you naturally focus on a problem, or a small problem, and then you figure out a solution for it using this formalism, and then you expand from there, right? And
Yeah.
so I think you don't have to know everything about it, and you can learn it at kind of more shallow levels at first, and then get deeper and deeper. And I think
Mm.
knowing when to stop is also
Mm.
an important thing. Like I can't do everything in the cloud, right? But I can do some
Yeah.
things, right?
Yeah.
And as opposed to if I just learn everything about one particular resource and go, yeah,
Yeah.
I know how to do. I know what this particular thing can do down to its last capability, but that's not useful because
Mm.
everything exists in an ecosystem, and they need
Yeah.
to interact with each other. So it's actually a really nice analogy, right?
Mm.
Knowledge is the
Mhm.
same. It's really the same as if you're setting up an application in the cloud, right?
Yeah.
You can learn all about AWS Lambda,
Yeah.
and that's the only thing that you will
Mhm.
know.
Yeah.
And you can't do anything with it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You can. Well, okay, actually, I take that back. Nowadays, you can do a lot. You can do a lot, but let's say it's not, Lambda is not as powerful as it is, and
Mhm.
so yeah, then you have to use other things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah. Kevin, I want to ask you. Do you have any advice for our students? Let's say we have students maybe listening. They're enrolled in mathematics program or something like this,
Hmm.
and probably I don't know at their second year or third year started to have doubts about like am I going to continue the academic path or should I continue this path or whatever? Do you have any advice for someone who kind of did both, right? You did sort of a little bit of academia and then you switch. Do you have any?
So I do, but I guess if I don't know how specific you want me to go with the advice, right? But I guess you know if you're doing mathematics in at university, firstly, I think in this day and age, it's a very good subject to be doing.
Mm,
It sets you up for the right way of thinking about abstractions. Becoming increasingly important in a lot of jobs, right? And so by itself, though, it's going to be, if you're heading towards industry, right? By itself, it may be a tough gig, just
mm,
because um, mathematics itself alone teaches you very many important skills, but you may not pick up on other skills um, if you just do mathematics by itself. And
mm,
so I think mathematics combined with another field of study like computer science or engineering or finance or business is actually a very nice combination
mm,
because it gives you exposure to where all of those ways of thinking about abstract things can be applied. and
mm,
um,
Mhm.
and one of the things is that if you're going to get a job, right, at some point you're going to need to apply your knowledge on some stuff, right?
yeah,
You can't just
Yeah.
write theorems. And so
No, you need to connect those
yeah,
worlds.
right. And so, having context is good, right? So,
mm,
you
Mhm.
know, probably this is probably obvious to most people who are listening because this was true back when I was young, and it's probably even more true today. But advice for people who want to pursue mathematics as a discipline, um, I would say mathematics is a beautiful subject. It's one of those things where in my opinion, it's distinct from so many other things that people study, right?
yeah,
And it's going to be a very rewarding thing to do a graduate
mm,
kind of to study mathematics at the
Yeah.
graduate level, to produce your own theorems and to understand something that no one else, well, I wouldn't say no one else, understand something that you didn't know before, right?
Mm.
I think it's rare to understand something that no one else understands, right? You might think that you can do that in a PhD, and then you find out that there are people who know everything, right? Right, and yeah, and there's not any chance that you can know something that they don't already know, or they can't figure out in like two
Yeah.
seconds, right?
Yeah.
There are some smart guys out there, but
Yeah.
for yourself, right? You understand something that you didn't understand before, and that you want to understand, and
Yeah.
the best time to do it is when you're young, because you don't have any um, encumbrances, right? Or you don't have any kind of you don't have life creeping in to tear you away from it yet.
Yeah.
And so uh, yeah, do it, but be aware that mathematics can be an isolating experience. Doing mathematics can be an isolating experience, like Ida was saying before.
Mm.
Not only because you may have to move countries to do it, but
Yeah.
it's difficult to communicate this to people who are not mathematicians.
Yes.
And it can be a frustrating experience because people are always going to make assumptions about what you're doing and why you're doing it,
Yeah.
and whether you make tons of money when you come out and you're going to be like an actuary. It's like, no, that's not what I studied at all. Right? And so but these days, right, on the other hand, mathematics as a discipline is becoming more and more collaborative.
Hmm.
If you look at people who are coming out of their PhDs now, right, they come up with tons of joint papers with people who are visiting or people who are doing the PhDs in the same department as them. And I think that's a really nice development in the field.
Hmm. Hmm.
And in fact, as you said earlier, doing mathematics is well, actually, I agree with this. The community to me is as important as the mathematics, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Without the community, it's hard to motivate yourself to say, why do I want to study this thing in particular?
Yeah.
Why this,
Yeah.
right? It's not like I was born with the knowledge of this particular field, right? But
Yeah.
I was drawn into it by both the subject matter and the personalities that inhabit the field, right?
Hmm.
And so that's also something that's part of the field. So
Yeah.
you know it's gonna there are gonna be times where doing math is hard, and every math student can probably attest to this, right? At some
Yes.
point, it's like, I wonder what would happen if I just quit and got the job down the road at Google or something, right? But resist the temptation at least until you're finished,
Hmm.
because there's I think, right, this advice is not true for everyone, but you start the PhD, you should finish it,
Yeah.
because um, you can argue about lost wages and whether you're sinking your life into something that's worthwhile, blah blah blah. But assuming that you went into the PhD with the right intentions, that you do want to
Mm.
study mathematics, and to understand a subset of it, to a good level, finishing it is a really nice feeling to be able to
Yeah.
say, I did it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the thing is, right, the PhD, actually, even if you're not um, thinking of pursuing a postdoc or becoming a professor, it at least in the United States, it helps you in terms of getting interviews. I know
Hmm.
that at least when I was applying for jobs, a lot of data science jobs still have the PhD preferred tag.
Mm.
Um, and so nowadays it's becoming less and less, because
Hmm.
there are, as I said, there are these programs
Yeah.
which are, Master of Science or Master of Data Science or
Yeah.
whatever. And, those people are perfectly equipped to do their job. There's no need to do a PhD, but
Mm.
there's still that signal to whoever's reading your resume that um, I I can do something independently, and I can finish something,
Yeah.
and I can
Yeah.
stick with it,
Yeah.
and I can write something
Yeah.
that's more or less in full sentences. So it's a good
Some
signal.
important skills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I've given some presentations
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
And so, if someone's looking at that, that's the package that they're getting.
Yeah.
And I think, to someone who's in tune with this whole, who knows about this,
Yeah.
they will ask you to, hey, do you want to talk about this position? And I think, you know, besides the data science seminar, right, having the math background worked as a postdoc and got a PhD. That helped, right?
Yeah.
Not everyone can just say, "Oh, I'm going to do data science now," and have someone hire you, right? It's not,
Yeah.
without the right qualifications. So the PhD is useful, but I guess its use is, you can use it for whatever you like, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily for becoming a professor. But then again, right? If your goal is to become a data scientist, there are more efficient paths these days.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I feel like we can talk for another 4 hours.
Yeah.
So all this stuff is go. But let me close with one more question. Unless Rory, you have another question.
Maybe just one
Yeah.
comment. I
Yeah.
mean, yes, there's probably, if you want to become a data scientist, there's a more direct path to that.
Hmm.
But maybe data science won't be
I
there
think.
in that way
Yeah.
in a few
Yeah.
years. And I think much more common than not is to have a bit of a winding path. It's very unclear about what are the possibilities out there. And
Yeah.
the point is to build up some good inherent skills
Yeah.
and some ways of thinking,
Yeah.
and then there are plenty of opportunities to apply those.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's wrap up with a final question. So let me set up the question first. Looking back, right? What's the things that very important for me? A, having a strong community, as we said, and then have someone that you look up to, right? Someone that mentors you. I think it's very important. And then, Kevin, I remember we talked about this at one point. I don't remember when, but we were talking about when I got this permanent job now, and becoming a full time sort of permanent lecturer. And then I remember you said to me that, oh yeah, now this is the time for you to give back to the community, or you said something along those lines. So if I've done sort of learning from someone who's more senior than me, learning how to teach, learning how to do research, learning from and senior can be also someone who is, maybe did their PhD 2 years ahead of you or something like this. So and then you talked about giving back to the community, because I was sort of in some sense complaining that I didn't have time to do research to Kenneth. This is one where how it came up. So I was
I see.
complaining to
Uh-huh.
Kenneth like, I didn't have time to do research. I have teaching to do, and I have this and this and this. And then Kenneth said, well, this is the time for you to go to sort of give back to the community. So did sort of like do the teaching seriously. And of course, like that, I took to sort of the level of mentoring students, right? So this is what something that we do a lot actually now at UP, is that we want to sort of give uh, more experience to students. So we're really taking students under our wing. So I just want to know. I think you did mention to me that you mentor also people. Can you talk about that part?
So how this started was actually a little bit uh, after I. It was almost when I was moving from my second job to my third one, and I had some spare time, and I thought, oh, and I got this message on LinkedIn, and this company was linking people who have some industry experience to people who want to get into the industry of, I guess, data science, and maybe tech in general. And I thought, this sounds like a good idea, right? Maybe I'll get on the app and see, see what it's all about. And I actually found one of my coworkers who was also on this, and I thought, oh, okay, maybe this is not a scam, right? Because you never know, right? Things that you see on the internet. So basically, how it works is, right? There are people who, like myself a few years ago, who are, coming out from a kind of a purely academic background, and they want to move into industry, and they lack the specific kind of knowledge that I was talking about. Right? Like, how do you talk to people in an interview?
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
How do you navigate the different people whom you meet? What kind of questions are they likely to ask you? How do you study? What is what questions should I ask the interviewers to figure out whether the job is right? Should I negotiate with them how to do it? In the event that I get a job. So I feel like, having worked for a few years, I've got maybe partial answers to some of these questions, and so I would have really appreciated some of these advice when I was a little
Mm,
bit younger, and I was in the same boat trying to break into the industry or any industry to get a job, right? And so the people who contacted me were mainly people who were graduating from either a PhD degree or about to finish a PhD degree or a master's degree. And they've done some stuff around computer science, maybe some machine learning, and they know a particular thing pretty well. And yeah, exactly wanting to know how else to round out their skills and how to navigate this interview maze, right? And so yeah, so I think I've been working with them for the last year or so, and I've had three. I don't want to call them students because they all have jobs now. Like three kind of people whom I worked with, and you know, yeah, it's a really quite a rewarding experience telling them
Mm.
what I know and trying to like kind of bridge the gap between kind of pure theoretical knowledge or very specific practical knowledge to just some one or two things that will make their lives a lot easier. And I think
Yeah.
um, hopefully I did help them, in some way. And I think I mentioned earlier they all got jobs in the end, and some took a little bit longer than others, but that's just how things went.
Yeah.
Because not because of anything on their part. It's just you change directions a little bit and reconsider kind of what roles you're looking at that will slow down things somewhat. But yeah, so I think yeah, mentoring is a really nice experience. I think it's rewarding.
Hmm.
But I think though on the flip side, I myself, when I was going through, I didn't go through any such program, and
Hmm.
and I kind of just winged it, right? And I think for people who are winging it, um, you have to be able to find mentors in
Yeah.
different people.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to have formally like PhD advisor. You're going to teach me everything I know. I'm your apprentice kind of thing, right? You're going to have to see people and
Absolutely.
figure
Yeah.
out what they can teach you, what their strengths are. And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. They could be younger than you. They could have less experience than you. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. You
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
still learn from them. And I think figuring that out means that you're kind of constructing, your own mentor out of your community. And I
Yeah.
think that's also an important skill to have. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. No, I
Fantastic.
mean, I think even when you have a PhD supervisor, that person doesn't have all the skills in the world, and you
Yeah.
still
Right,
need to
right,
find
right.
other
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, yeah,
It doesn't
right,
have all the
sure.
answers. Okay, cool. So, Kenneth, if any of our viewers slash students want to have a chat with you about these things, are you up for it? Can they
I'm
contact you?
absolutely up for it. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can send them my email. I'm happy to chat with them over
Okay.
email. I don't know,
Yeah.
the time difference might be a little bit difficult. I know you guys just woke up, but it's 30 minutes after midnight here. But
Yeah.
Whoa.
that's what happens when you do things globally, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah, you have to
Yeah,
take time difference into account. But I suppose if it's email communication, then there's no issue.
yeah, for
I
sure, of
suppose. Yeah.
course.
Okay, fantastic. So yeah, if anyone wants to chat with Kenneth, can contact either me or Rory for me, yeah, ask for the for Kenneth's email address. Okay, cool. Ken, thank you very much for coming onto the podcast today. I think it's great to catch up, for us, and then yeah, to listen more about sort of your experience in your studies and in your work experience. Thank you very much.
Cool. Well, thanks very much for having me. It was my pleasure.
Yeah. Okay, and we'll see you all in the next episode. Bye.
Cheerio.
Bye.